What would you do if something you bought for $10 at a neighborhood yard sale dragged you into the middle of a drug ring, a home invasion, and the kind of paranoia that makes you afraid of your own front porch? I never believed a toolbox could destroy my sense of safety, but that's exactly what happened, and I need to warn you, because the scariest part wasn't what was inside it, it was how far someone would go to get it back. I'm 31, an insurance agent, which basically means I spend my life assessing risks and avoiding surprises, but none of that helped me when I pulled into that quiet cul-de-sac on a sunny Saturday morning, sipping lukewarm coffee and half listening to a podcast about retirement planning. The sign was taped to a street lamp, yard sale, 1 day only, written in Sharpie on faded cardboard, with an arrow pointing toward a modest beige house at the end of the block. I almost drove past it. I always tell myself I won't stop, but there was something calming about poking through other people's cast-offs, like mining forgotten memories. The yard was quiet. A folding table was set up near the driveway with old books, tangled cords, rusty gardening shears, chipped mugs, and next to it, resting in a patch of shadow like it didn't want to be noticed, was a red metal toolbox. Scratched, dented, heavy-looking, the kind your grandfather would keep in his workshop, filled with tools that smelled like oil and steel and time. I opened it. Inside were a few old tools, a hammer with a splintering wooden handle, 2 rusted screwdrivers, some dull sockets. It wasn't valuable, but it felt real, like it had seen things. $10, said the man sitting behind the table, a lanky older guy with leathery skin and a blank expression that didn't change when he said it. Sold, I replied, handing over the bill. I tossed it into my trunk and forgot about it for days, letting it sit in my garage like a time capsule, unopened, unbothered. Then one evening, after dinner, I heard the doorbell ring. I wasn't expecting anyone. Standing on my porch was a stranger, maybe mid-40s, wiry build, short brown hair, a tired, sharp face with hollow eyes that twitched slightly as he spoke. "You bought a toolbox last week," he said, his voice low and scratchy like he hadn't used it in a while. "Yeah," I said slowly. "Why?" "It's mine," he said, stepping half a foot closer, just enough to make me tense. "It was sold by mistake. I need it back." I glanced past him. No car, no bag, no emotion. Just that one sentence. "I bought it fair and square," I said. "You sure it's the same one?" "It is." His voice didn't waver. "I need it back." "Look," I said, trying to stay calm. "I got it from the guy running the sale. If there's a problem, talk to him." He stared at me for a long second, his jaw working slowly. "I'll be back," he muttered, then turned and walked away like nothing had happened. I locked the door immediately, heart thudding. The next 2 days were quiet, and I started to wonder if I'd imagined how unsettling he'd been, until he came back. This time, it was around 9 p.m., and I was watching a show on my laptop when I heard pounding on the door, relentless, angry. "I know you're in there," he shouted. "Give me the toolbox and this ends." I peeked through the peephole. Same guy, more agitated, eyes burning. I didn't respond. He banged on the door for what felt like forever before storming off. Over the next week, he returned 4 more times, sometimes late at night, sometimes early morning, and sometimes he didn't even knock. He just stood on the sidewalk across the street, staring at my house. Once I saw him try the doorknob, quietly, like he was testing it. I hadn't locked it that night. That was my wake-up call. I started double-bolting everything, sleeping with a kitchen knife on my nightstand. I told a friend, who told me to call the cops. "The guy's not just after a box," he said. "He's unstable. Do it before he escalates." But I hesitated. He hadn't broken in, hadn't laid a hand on me. Still, it felt like pressure building. I didn't realize how close it was to bursting until that Thursday night. I was doing dishes, phone playing music in the background, when the banging started again, but this time it wasn't knocking, it was violent, angry, like someone trying to shoulder the door off its hinges. "Open the damn door," he screamed. "You don't know what you're messing with." I dropped the plate I was holding, ran to the door, and shouted, "I'm calling the police," already dialing 911 with my other hand. He muttered something I couldn't make out, then vanished into the dark. The cops came quickly. I gave a full description, filed a report, showed them my security cam footage. "Do you know this guy?" the officer asked. "No," I said, "but he says I have his toolbox. He keeps coming back." The cop nodded slowly. "We'll step up patrols in your area. But if he shows up again, don't wait. Call immediately." I lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling, wondering what the hell was in that box that was worth stalking someone over. I grabbed a flashlight, went to the garage, and opened it again. Same old tools, nothing strange. But then I noticed something. The bottom seemed uneven. I lifted the tools and tapped it. Hollow. With my screwdriver, I pried up the false bottom, and froze. Beneath it were 4 small plastic bags packed tight with off-white powder. My hands went cold. My stomach flipped. I wasn't stupid. I knew exactly what I was looking at. Drugs. A stash. Hidden. Forgotten. Or not. He hadn't wanted the toolbox. He'd wanted what was inside. I didn't hesitate. I packed it back together and drove straight to the police station. The officer who took it didn't even blink. "You did the right thing," he said. "But be careful. If he knows it's gone, he might not take that well." I stayed at a friend's house that weekend, trying to put it behind me. Then I came home Sunday night and immediately felt something wrong. The porch light was off. I always left it on. My front door was slightly open. The lock broken. I stepped inside, heart hammering. The house was a disaster. Couch flipped, drawers emptied, fridge door open, cabinets torn apart. They'd been looking for the drugs, but they were already in police custody. I moved slowly toward the hallway, and heard footsteps running. I sprinted to the back just in time to see 2 shadows jumping the fence. I didn't chase. I just stood there shaking, the kitchen knife in my hand useless. The cops came again. I told them what happened. They promised more patrols. I replaced every lock, installed a full security system, moved the bed away from the window. For the next month, nothing happened. No strange cars, no shadows, no visits. I started breathing again, but the fear never really left. Then one night, the motion alert on my phone pinged at 2:41 a.m. I checked the feed, and there he was. The same man, standing in my driveway, just staring at the house. Not moving, not knocking, just watching. After a full minute, he turned and walked away. I haven't seen him since. I don't know if he gave up, got arrested, or worse. But every time I hear the doorbell, every time a car parks across the street for too long, I freeze. That $10 toolbox cost me thousands in repairs, endless anxiety, and more sleepless nights than I can count. And for what? A reminder that the past doesn't stay buried, and sometimes what you bring home brings something else with it. So next time you're at a yard sale, and you find something cheap, heavy, and nostalgic, think twice before you buy it. Because the scariest monsters aren't haunted dolls or cursed antiques. Sometimes, they're the living, breathing kind, the ones that want something back. And they'll come looking. Or worse, some are invitations. What if a forgotten VHS tape from a yard sale showed you footage of your own house, decades before you moved in, capturing a family's slow descent into terror and revealing a presence that never truly left? That's exactly what happened to me, and even now, weeks later, I can't step into my living room without feeling like someone, or something, is still watching. My name's Adam, 34, and I work in IT, so you'd think I'd be all about the latest gadgets and streaming services, but the truth is I'm a sucker for analog, vinyl records, old consoles, CRT televisions, and yeah, even VHS tapes. There's something about the ritual of rewinding a tape, the static fuzz of the screen, the way the past feels more real when it's a little grainy and worn. That's why when I passed a moving sale just a few doors down from my house one Saturday morning and spotted a box labeled Old Movies, $5, I didn't even hesitate. The sale was nothing special, just a few tables and an older couple sipping iced tea on their porch. I said hello, paid $5 for the whole box without even checking the contents, and brought it home like I'd found buried treasure. That afternoon I spent hours digging through it. Mostly 80s and 90s classics, taped off TV copies of Back to the Future, Gremlins, E.T., even some weird cartoons I hadn't seen since I was a kid, but at the bottom of the box was a single unmarked black tape with no label, just sticky residue where something had once been peeled off. That one, I saved for last. Later that night, after the sun had gone down and I'd had a couple beers, I popped the tape into my old VCR, curious to see if it was someone's forgotten home video or just static. At first, it looked like nothing, just a flicker of grainy lines and audio bits. But then the image settled, and my heart skipped. It was a living room, a family, mom, dad, 2 kids, sitting together on a couch, passing around popcorn, laughing at something on the TV. The quality was terrible, but the layout of the room, the couch placement, the chipped fireplace mantel, the alcove bookshelf on the right, it was my living room. My exact living room. I leaned closer to the screen, frozen. It wasn't just similar, it was identical. Even the wallpaper, the old floral pattern I'd always meant to replace, was the same. I'd bought this house 5 years ago from a retired couple who said they'd lived here for over 2 decades. I'd never seen photos of kids during the showing, never heard mention of a family like this. The footage looked like it was from the early 90s, judging by the clothes and hairstyles. I sat in stunned silence, watching this unknown family live their ordinary life in my house, in my living room, a decade before I'd even known the place existed. I told myself it was probably just some old footage the previous owners forgot to throw out. But then the tone changed. The laughter stopped. The kids, maybe 8 or 9, started glancing nervously toward the hallway on the left. The mom whispered something to the dad, and he got up, slowly, like he didn't want to draw attention. The camera stayed fixed, but the tension in the room was suddenly unmistakable. The kids clutched each other. The mom looked toward the hall again, eyes wide, mouth tight. And then something flickered across the wall. A shadow, but not shaped like a person. It stretched too long, too angular. It moved without anyone casting it. One of the kids pointed, but the mom pulled his hand down quickly. I stared at the screen, my heart hammering. What the hell was I watching? Then the camera jolted. It fell sideways, hitting the floor, showing just their feet. The family was still, too still. Whispers began, low, garbled, like voices speaking backward or underwater. The tape buzzed again. When the image came back, the screen showed only the hallway, dark and empty, until something shifted in the shadows. A figure stepped halfway into frame. Not a person. Too tall, too thin, with joints that bent wrong and an absence of detail, like it had been smudged out of reality. The tape cut out, just static. I sat there in the dark, unable to breathe. My living room was silent, but it felt charged, heavy, as if someone, or something, had been watching me the whole time. I told myself it was a prank, maybe a student film left behind. But the details, the intimacy, the fear on that family's faces, it was real. The next morning, I rewatched the tape. In the daylight, it was a little easier to study. I noticed a calendar on the wall in the background. It said 1993. That was 32 years ago. Before the couple I bought the house from even moved in. I paused the screen to look more closely, and then noticed something else. Just before the tape cut to black, in the last frame, the figure, whatever it was, turned. Not its head, but its entire body shifted in one fluid motion, and even in that low-res blur, I swear it looked directly into the camera. I felt cold all over. I ejected the tape and shoved it into a drawer. But that night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about that moment when the family changed, when they all stopped pretending things were okay. The fear was real, and I couldn't stop wondering, what happened to them? I went to ask my next-door neighbor, Mrs. Raymond, who'd lived on the street for 40 years and knew everyone's business. When I asked if she remembered a family living in my house in the early 90s, she froze. They left suddenly, she said. I don't like talking about it. I asked why. She wouldn't say, just shook her head. They abandoned everything. Furniture, toys, food still in the fridge. Like they ran out in the middle of the night. The house sat empty for 3 years before the next owners moved in. I asked her if anyone else ever mentioned strange things about the place. Her eyes dropped. Not to me, she whispered. But I never liked walking past your living room window at night. I went home and tried to forget about it, but that was impossible. Because the following night, I heard whispers. Not in a dream, not from the TV, in the house, near the hallway. At first I thought it was just the sound of wind or the pipes, but then I caught movement from the corner of my eye, a shadow, slipping along the edge of the wall, bending in ways that didn't match the shape of anything in the room. I turned on every light. Nothing. The house was quiet, but I couldn't bring myself to look directly into the hallway for the rest of the night. A few days later, I came home from work and noticed the drawer where I'd hidden the VHS tape was open. Not just open, pulled completely out and resting on the floor. I never leave it like that. I checked the footage from my security camera. It glitched, just static from 1:14 p.m. to 1:22 p.m., the exact window when the drawer would have been disturbed. Nothing else in the house was touched. Just the drawer, just the tape. I decided to digitize it. I wanted to preserve it in case something happened to the original. As I transferred it, I watched again, frame by frame, pausing every few seconds. That's when I saw it. In one of the earliest scenes, during the family's laughter, there was a mirror on the wall behind them. I hadn't noticed it before, but in that mirror, faint and barely visible, was a tall, thin silhouette standing in the hallway, just watching. It was there the whole time, not moving, not reacting, just watching, and it was in the mirror before the family even started looking toward the hallway, like it had always been there. I felt sick. That night, I dreamed I was in the house, walking through the hallway, but all the doors led back into the living room, over and over. Every time I turned a corner, I was back where I started. The shadow was always there, just ahead, waiting. The next day, I brought the tape to a friend who worked in film restoration. I didn't tell him anything, just asked if he could analyze the footage. 2 days later, he called me and asked me, half jokingly, if I'd faked the footage. Dude, he said, whatever's in this, it's not a special effect. There's no masking, no overlay. That shadow thing, it's on the original film. It's part of it. I asked if he could trace where the tape came from. He said no, no markings, no tags, no identifiers. It was like it came from nowhere. That night, I set the tape on my coffee table, intending to throw it out the next morning. I was done, but sometime around 3 a.m., I woke to the sound of the VCR powering on. Not just the whir of the motors, but the click of the tape being pulled in. I bolted out of bed and ran to the living room. The TV was on, static. The tape I'd left on the table was gone. I ejected it from the player and backed away slowly. I didn't sleep. The next morning, I put the tape back in the box it came in and shoved it into the attic, burying it under a pile of junk I never touch. I haven't watched it since, but the house hasn't been the same. Every night, I hear the same creak in the hallway, same time, same slow, stretching footstep. Sometimes I wake up and find the living room lights on. Sometimes the hallway is darker than it should be, like the shadows are thicker there, like they're watching. I've installed lights, cameras, noise detectors, but the footage never shows anything. It just goes fuzzy when the sounds start. I don't know what happened to that family. I don't know if the presence followed them or stayed here, bound to the wood, the walls, the tape. All I know is it's still here, and now it knows I've seen it. So if you ever buy a mystery tape at a yard sale, don't watch it alone. And if it shows something familiar, someplace you know, some hallway you recognize, stop it. Burn it, bury it, because some recordings aren't just home videos. Some are warnings, waiting for me to bring it home again. What if the antique mirror you brought home from a yard sale didn't just reflect your room, but watched it, remembered it, and invited something else to return through it? I never believed in haunted objects or cursed antiques, but after what happened with the mirror I bought one cloudy Saturday morning, I don't just believe, I obsess, and I haven't been able to look at my own reflection the same way since. I've always been a sucker for vintage furniture. The wear, the craftsmanship, the stories they feel like they're holding inside, it's all part of the charm. That's why I was so drawn to a quiet neighborhood yard sale tucked under an oak tree at the end of a cul-de-sac last month. I'd been out walking with a coffee in hand, enjoying the cool weather, when I saw the sign, Antiques and Vintage Finds. The yard was sparse but tidy. A few tables lined the driveway, displaying dusty picture frames, old cameras, brass candle holders, and under the eave of the house, leaning against the beige stucco wall, was a full-length mirror in a gilded, ornate frame. It stood nearly 6 feet tall, carved with vines and roses, the gold leaf chipped in places but still glowing with a soft, timeless sheen. The glass itself was slightly warped, just enough to give it that rippling, dreamlike reflection I always found beautiful in older pieces. I ran my hand along the edge of the frame and felt a subtle vibration, like a hum. The man running the sale walked over. He was thin, wiry, in his late 50s, with graying hair slicked back and sharp blue eyes that didn't blink as much as they should have. Admiring the mirror, he asked, "It's been in my family for generations." "It's beautiful," I replied. "How much?" He hesitated, not like he was thinking of a price, but like he wasn't sure he wanted to part with it. "You sure it's what you're looking for?" "Yeah," I said with a smile. "It would look perfect in my living room." He studied me. Then he sighed, said, "All right," and added that it was too heavy for me to carry alone. He'd deliver it himself. I was about to say I could handle it, but something in his tone made me back down. I gave him my address, and 2 hours later, his beat-up pickup pulled into my driveway. He didn't want help carrying it in. He brought it inside, carefully placed it against the far wall in my living room, and stood back, hands on his hips. "Looks good here," he said softly. "Just, take care of it." Then he looked around the room, scanning it slowly, like he was memorizing every object, every corner. It felt intrusive. He finally nodded and left, and I locked the door behind him with a strange sense of relief. At first, I was thrilled. The mirror glowed in the soft lamplight, adding depth and elegance to the space. But by evening, something felt off. I couldn't put my finger on it, but the room felt heavier. Still, I chalked it up to the mirror's age or maybe just a little buyer's anxiety. The next morning, when I stepped out to get the mail, I noticed a car parked across the street, an old blue sedan with dark tinted windows. At first, I thought it belonged to a neighbor, but when I returned that afternoon, the car was still there. Same position, unmoved. I peeked through the window and saw someone in the driver's seat. The shape of his head, his posture, it was the yard sale guy. Watching, my heart picked up. Maybe he was visiting someone nearby. Maybe it was a coincidence. But the next day, the car was back. And the next, always parked in different spots, but always facing my house. By the fourth day, I was rattled. That evening, while making dinner, I peeked out the kitchen window and saw him again, this time parked directly in front of my driveway, just sitting in the dark car, facing my house. I dropped the knife, marched outside, and crossed the lawn, trying to keep my hands from shaking. As soon as I stepped onto the sidewalk, the car engine started. He pulled away slowly, never making eye contact, never acknowledging me. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the mirror. I moved it to the garage, draped a blanket over it, and tried to forget it was even there. But the house didn't feel any lighter. The next night, I was sitting in the living room when headlights poured through the front window. I looked out, and the sedan was in my driveway. The man stepped out and began pacing the sidewalk, staring up at the house, occasionally glancing toward the front door. I grabbed my phone and whispered to 911, locking every door and window as quietly as I could. He hasn't tried to break in yet, I told the dispatcher, but he's watching. He's been watching all week. The man stood outside for several minutes, unmoving, before the sound of distant sirens caused him to jump back into the car and speed off. When the police arrived, I gave them everything: description, plate number, story. They said they'd patrol more often, but they couldn't do much unless he did something overt. I wanted to believe it was over. But the next day, I went into the garage to get something, and the blanket covering the mirror had been pulled off. I was certain I'd tucked it tightly. Now it lay crumpled on the floor, and the mirror stood exposed. The room felt colder. I stared into the reflection, nothing strange, just me. But I couldn't shake the sense that I was being watched, not by the mirror, but through it. That night, I dreamed I was in my living room, standing in front of the mirror, but my reflection was slightly delayed, like it was watching me first before it reacted. The dream ended with the reflection stepping forward, while I stayed frozen. I woke in a cold sweat. The next few nights were worse. Footsteps in the hallway, flickering lights, the mirror creaking against the wall like someone had pressed their palm against the glass. I checked the security footage, nothing, no movement, but the sound always came just after 2 a.m. I brought the mirror back into the house, thinking maybe I could confront whatever weirdness was attached to it. I placed it back in the living room, exactly where it had been before. For a moment, the room felt calm, then I turned to leave, and in the corner of the mirror, something moved that didn't match my motion. I spun back around. Nothing, but the reflection wasn't right. The shadows were longer, deeper. It looked like the room in the mirror had more corners than mine did. That night, while I lay in bed, I heard whispering. Soft, low, unintelligible. It sounded like someone pacing just outside my door. I held my breath and listened. The whispering stopped. I got up, walked down the hallway, and peeked into the living room. The mirror was glowing faintly, not from the lamp, but from within. As I stepped closer, the reflection began to ripple. I stopped a foot away, and in that undulating glass, I saw someone standing behind me. I spun, no one. I looked again, empty room, but the reflection still held the shape for a full 5 seconds before it melted back into mine. That was the first time I truly considered destroying it. But something held me back. Something I can't explain. It wasn't fear. It was like the mirror wanted to stay. Like removing it now would only make things worse. I started sleeping in the guest room. Every night the same things happened. Footsteps, whispers, reflections that didn't line up. One night I caught the shadow of someone walking across the living room on the security feed, but when I rewound it, the footage was gone. That's when I started researching. I found an old newspaper article from 1975. Same address. A woman had gone missing inside the house. Her husband claimed she vanished into thin air while standing in front of a mirror matching the exact description of mine. The case was ruled as mental illness, and the mirror was passed down through the man's family. I looked up the name of the last known relative, same name as the guy who sold me the mirror. I was furious. I drove back to the house from the yard sale, but it was abandoned. Windows boarded, grass dead, mailbox overflowing. The whole thing had been a setup. I tried calling the number I'd gotten from the sale receipt. It was disconnected. That night, I decided to confront it. I set up a camera directly in front of the mirror and sat on the couch across from it, waiting. 4 hours, nothing. Then just past 3 a.m., the reflection flickered. My reflection stayed still, but I hadn't. I lifted my arm. The image didn't move. I stood up. My reflection stayed seated. I walked forward, and the image smiled. It lifted its arm and waved. My blood ran cold. The camera shorted out. I reached out and touched the glass. It was freezing. I pulled back, and as I turned to run, I saw the figure step out of the reflection and into the room. Just a flicker, just a shimmer, then gone. I ran, slept in my car, moved out 2 days later. The mirror, I tried to smash it, but every time I struck it, the reflection didn't crack. Only the wall behind it did. I finally wrapped it, chained it, and locked it in the crawlspace of the house before I sold the place. I told the new owner nothing. I had no proof, only scars, only memories. And even now, even in my new apartment, I don't keep mirrors. Not in the bedroom, not in the bathroom. I cover the reflective surfaces at night, because sometimes, just sometimes, I catch movement where there shouldn't be any, just at the corner of my vision. And when I turn to look, I swear I see blue eyes, staring, unblinking, and some things don't need the chair to find their way back to you. What would you do if an old rocking chair you bought for $20 started moving on its own at night, rocking, creaking, whispering, like someone else was still using it and didn't want to leave? I always thought haunted furniture was just a cliché, something reserved for horror movies or ghost stories people made up to scare kids, but after what happened with the antique chair I found at a quiet yard sale last fall, I know now that some objects carry more than memories. They carry attachments, unfinished business, and sometimes, something much worse. I was never big on antiques, but vintage pieces always caught my eye, especially when they had a kind of quiet charm, like they belonged in another life. That Saturday morning had started off slow. I'd just gotten back from a brutal week at work, long hours, meetings that led nowhere, and I needed something to distract myself. I grabbed a coffee and wandered through a nearby neighborhood hosting a community-wide yard sale. Most of the streets were packed with folding tables and overpriced junk, but down at the end of a shady cul-de-sac, I found a house with a lone setup under a gnarled maple tree. No signs, no crowd, just a few random pieces scattered across the lawn, dusty glassware, mismatched silverware, and near the base of the tree, a wooden rocking chair with curved legs and floral carvings etched into the arms. It was dark-stained, scratched in places, and clearly old, but there was something about it. The design was beautiful in a haunting kind of way, the kind of craftsmanship you don't see anymore. I ran my fingers along the armrest and imagined it in the corner of my living room, next to the window where the afternoon light spilled in. "How much for the chair?" I asked. The woman running the sale barely looked up from the box she was sorting through. She was in her late 50s, thin, pale, with a worn expression like someone who hadn't slept well in years. "20, she said flatly. "It's an antique, right?" I asked, trying to make conversation. "It's old," she replied, then muttered, "You want it or not?" Her tone was so strange, like she wasn't just eager to sell it, but desperate to get rid of it. That should have been a red flag, but I told myself she was probably just tired, loaded the chair into my car, and drove home with that giddy feeling of having found something unique. The chair fit perfectly by the front window. I spent the rest of the afternoon rearranging the living room, centering the chair in the sunlight, draping a soft throw blanket over the back, placing a small rug underneath. It looked like it belonged. That evening, I sat in it for the first time with a book and a cup of tea. The wood creaked gently under my weight, and the rocking motion was oddly soothing. I sat there for nearly an hour, lost in thought, before heading to bed. Around midnight, I was dozing off when I heard it, a faint creaking sound coming from the living room. It was rhythmic, slow, back and forth. My heart thudded once, then tried to rationalize. Probably just the wood settling. Old houses make noise, right? I rolled over and went to sleep. The next morning, I walked into the living room and noticed the chair was slightly angled, facing more toward the window than before. Maybe I bumped it while vacuuming, but I hadn't vacuumed. I shoved the thought away and went about my day. That night, as I turned off the lights, I hesitated in the hallway. The room was dark, but the chair was barely visible in the moonlight, still and quiet. I went to bed, but around 2 a.m., the creaking came again, louder this time, like someone heavier was using it. I sat up in bed, fully alert. The sound continued, steady and slow, then suddenly stopped. I got up and crept toward the living room, heart pounding. When I turned on the light, the chair was still. Nothing else in the room was out of place, but the throw blanket had slid off the back and was lying on the floor. I picked it up, trying not to look over my shoulder, and told myself I must have imagined it. But the next night, it happened again. The creaking, the movement, the blanket on the floor. I decided to test it. I placed a small piece of tape under one of the chair's legs to mark its position. I even set up my phone on a shelf to record overnight. The following morning, I reviewed the footage. For the first few hours, nothing. Then around 2:37 a.m., the chair began to rock, slowly, gently, as if someone had just taken a seat. But no one was there. The camera didn't glitch. There were no cuts. The chair moved on its own for almost 5 minutes before stopping. My blood ran cold. That evening, I called my friend Anna, told her everything. She rolled her eyes at first, saying I'd probably been watching too many horror movies. I invited her over. "You'll see," I said. That night, she sat on the couch while I replayed the footage. Her smile faded. "Okay, that's weird," she admitted. We sat in silence, watching the chair. At 2:11 a.m., it started to creak. We froze. The chair began rocking again, right in front of us. No wind, no vibrations, just movement. "Okay," she whispered. "That's not normal." She left in a hurry, promising to check in the next day. I didn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the chair moving. The following night, I fell asleep on the couch around 1 a.m. I woke to a loud bang. The chair was rocking violently, slamming against the wall with each swing. I leapt to my feet, heart hammering, shouting, "Stop," without thinking. The chair froze mid-rock, tilted slightly forward. Then it slowly settled back down. The room went silent. I backed away, grabbed my car keys, and left the house. I slept in a hotel. The next morning, I dragged the chair to the curb and left a sign that read, "Free." I didn't care who took it. I just wanted it gone. By afternoon, it had disappeared. But the house still felt wrong. The corner where the chair had been felt colder, emptier. The air was heavy, like the absence of it had created a vacuum. I slept with the lights on that night. But at 2:09 a.m., I heard the creaking again. I ran into the living room, heart in my throat. The chair wasn't there, but the sound was. The rug where it used to sit was moving, rocking slightly as if something unseen still occupied that space. I screamed and backed out of the room. The next day, I called the local historical society, asked about the house, and whether anyone had reported strange activity before. The woman I spoke to sounded hesitant. "That address," she said. "There was an incident back in the 1960s. A woman died, elderly. She had a favorite rocking chair. Her husband found her one morning, still sitting in it. Said she'd passed peacefully, but neighbors claimed they saw her in the window for weeks after, just rocking." I asked if the chair had stayed in the house. "No," she said. "It went missing after the house was sold. Some people said it was cursed. Others said it was just grief." I hung up and sat in silence for a long time. That night, the creaking came again. No chair, just sound. Then the whispering started. Not words, just breathy, low tones that felt like they were coming from the floor itself. I tried sage. I tried prayers. I even tried a medium who walked into the house and walked right back out. "There's something still sitting in that chair," she said. "Even if the chair's gone, it hasn't moved on." I asked what I should do. She just shook her head. "It's not about the object. It's about the presence." I moved a week later. Didn't take anything from the living room. Left it all behind. My new apartment is small, modern, clean. But every so often, I wake up at 2:09 a.m. and hear it. Just faintly. A creaking, a soft whisper, a weight settling into something that isn't there. And when I look toward the corner of my bedroom, there's a patch of shadow that always seems just a little too deep. I haven't bought used furniture since. I never will again. Because now I understand. Some things are more than just old. Some things wait. In the next nightmare. If that story gave you chills, don't forget to hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And if you haven't already, subscribe for more immersive horror stories just like this one. Would you have kept the mirror? Or would you have gotten rid of it the second it started whispering? Let me know in the comments. And if you've got a friend who loves a good scare, share this video with them. But maybe warn them first. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you